Can you hear me?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, I could hear you. Okay, talk a little bit.
Okay.
Okay,
Well,
it's good. It's coming in okay. Now, here's the problem. We had a little disconnect, and there's another link that opened up, and it seems like it's recording right now. And I'm sorry for, I don't know what happened. It said overload. So I don't know. So let me just make sure that you're on. I see you. We just want to collect more people. Hi, we will wait just a few seconds. Oh, there's my typo as usual. Okay, so basically, I'm going to go back on to the first stream and let people know that it's on the other, because this is a very, very nice talk that you have. And I'm so glad that you came back. So hold on just 1 second, and I'm going to tell, can you tell a new stream? This is crazy. This is how it is with live streams, and I noticed it all across the board. I was watching Catholic Answers last night, and they had a big screw up, and it was funny, and I was like, not that it was funny, but I was like, thank God it's not just me. How are you doing? How are you doing? You're all the way from Virginia, and you are here for the second time. You had the most beautiful talk. The first talk was very historical and very, it's like how God flowered this beautiful picture of life. And, there was no way of really seeing it until you go back and analyze everything and put all the pieces together like a puzzle.
Right. That's right. That's exactly right.
So you must be like a puzzle expert.
That's a little bit true, because that's kind of how my brain works, and it's always thinking and tooling with things and figuring things out, putting the pieces of puzzle together.
That's amazing. Yeah. So I want to see if more people populated into this live stream. There's some more people, but let's see. It's an amazing story that you told me about your coming into the faith. I mean, it was like you were hand delivered. It was like a golden spoon, not a silver spoon, by Our Lady, who is right behind you. That's a beautiful piece of art.
Yeah, it really is. I didn't paint it myself, but it is beautiful. I love it.
Yes, but it just seems like so many mystical things came along your way, and maybe you needed it. Who knows? Because it's amazing.
No, I know. That's exactly right. It's funny, because you know how God chooses the people who are least likely to succeed. Joan of Arc is an example of somebody who would be the least likely to lead an army and be successful.
Right.
And so God chooses these people like Peter and the apostles and all these people who are sort of instruments for God, but that are very imperfect in their own ways. And I was one of those same kinds of people.
It's so beautiful. So could you give us a little bit of a history, a background of you? But we should actually get started. So tell us a little bit about your history before you came into the faith, and you could take off from there.
Yeah. Well, that's actually where my story starts anyway. I grew up in a family that was sort of a typical Presbyterian family in Houston, Texas. We went to church, I think, maybe roughly once a week on the weekends, and we had lots of Greek devotion. It was saying grace before meals, and going to church on Sunday. That was about it. I considered myself a Christian and growing up. But then once I got to college, of course, college does a number on your head, and it will do all sorts of things to your belief system. I became an agnostic, and then after college, in 1985, 86, I decided I was an atheist. So at that point, I was literally starting a long search for the meaning of my life. Now, Karen, let me ask you a question, because I don't see your image, and I'm wondering if you're still there. I'm going to keep going anyway, but I'm just going to let you know I don't see your image, so you might want to fix that if it needs to be fixed. So in 1986, what happened to me is I was going through this long process of trying to figure out what could be the meaning of my life. And the reality was that I came to the conclusion that we must all just be cosmic accidents, that somehow the universe just developed on its own. I was not sure how that could possibly be. And that every one of us, though we have a consciousness of our own being, that didn't really make sense, but I just thought we must be a byproduct of the universe itself. So what happened was I had this long stretch of searching for, all through my 20s, of searching for what could be the meaning of my life. And during this time also, I was from college on what I would call very much pro-abortion person. I was not pro-life in any way, and I was very dogmatic in my beliefs. And my dogmatic beliefs were very out there. I was very much a person who was not willing to concede and not willing to really carefully take other people's opinions. Can you still hear me, Karen?
Yes, I'm here.
Great. Okay. So that year, in the year 1991,
I had a friend at work who I was working for a group of government contractors, but the office was very, very small. It was only about 5 people. And one of these people, her name was Beth, and she was a good friend of mine. And she said to me, with the topic of abortion came up one day, and I said, don't even say, she was pro-life. And I said, oh, don't even start with me there. Don't even start. And she said, well, and she had a very, very calm demeanor. She was not overly, she wasn't angry or anything. She had actually some good facts on her fingertips. And so in that conversation and a subsequent 1 or 2 conversations that we had, she asked me first, do you know much about Margaret Sanger? And I said, I knew the name, but I didn't know anything else. I didn't actually have facts on my fingertips. And I said, well, no, not really, not a whole lot. And she said, do you realize that she was a great supporter of Adolf Hitler? And I said, no. I said, I doubt that's true. And she says, no, it is true. And then she went on and she told me a couple of more pieces of information. She quoted some of the quotes that are famous now on the internet, but back then were not quite so famous, that Margaret Sanger had said. And I said, well, where'd you get that? Because I was dubious of this information. She said, oh, it's actually common knowledge. She said, and she went on to tell me a little bit about the background of Margaret Sanger, who was the leader at the time of the abortion movement. And I went back to my, I was dating a girl at the time. She had actually worked at Planned Parenthood at the time. And, or not when I was dating her, but previously, this other person, this girl that I was dating. And I brought it up to her and I said, hey, you know Beth at work, at my work? She says, yeah. I said, Beth tells me that Margaret Sanger was, a supporter of Adolf Hitler, believed in eugenics, and then I listed a number of things that she had said. And my friend, a girl that I was dating, said, well, I have to tell you that some of what she says may be true, but blah, 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 blah. And she said something different. And she says, what do you think of that? And I said, I can tell by the way you said that, that's a memorized answer that you have. I said, somebody told you that when this topic comes up about Margaret Sanger, here's what you say. You say some of what has been told you may be true, but blah, blah, blah. And she was rattled by this because it was almost like I was reading her mind. And it was true. She had a memorized answer that she used and she pulled out when Margaret Sanger came up. So long story short is I had these discussions and I came a little bit confused, but abortion was actually not a big issue in my life at the time. So I just kind of went on with life. And during that period of time, maybe about 3 or 4 months later, My friend Beth came to me one day. She was a cradle Catholic. Her husband was a cradle Catholic. They were in their mid to late 20s like me. They had no children yet, but they were, even though they were cradle Catholics, they were not strong Catholics. I would just say they were average 20s Catholics that went to church on Sunday, and that was about it. And she said, would you be interested in going with my husband, Steve, and I to on a trip to Europe? And I thought, well, that's an interesting question. I said, I love traveling. Immediately, I was going to say yes. And I said, where are you going? And she said, we're going to Eastern Europe, to Yugoslavia, to a village called Medjugorje. I thought, I'd never heard of this place. And I thought, what the heck would you go to a place like that for? I couldn't figure out what would be the reason. And I said, why do you want to go there? She said, well, we've heard reports that the Virgin Mary is appearing there, and we want to go see for ourselves. Now, I'll give a little statement here and say that the apparitions in Medjugorje have not been approved yet because they are an ongoing series of apparitions. The church will make a final decision after the apparitions themselves have ended. So that's sort of the caveat to all of this. But I do refer to the apparitions as apparitions or the alleged apparitions, either way. But in the meantime, I said to my friend Beth, I said, hey, if you want to go to like Paris, I would love to go along with you guys. But to a small town, a village in Yugoslavia, I said, I have actually driven through Yugoslavia in 1983. And I kind of decided I wasn't going to go back again. And she said, okay, well, you're always invited. Before we go, you're welcome to come. They went on their trip. They came back, and they were absolutely on fire. These were people who were cradle Catholics, but were not very strong in their faith. All of a sudden, something had happened, and they were on fire. And it was an amazing thing to actually witness and see. Now, the Blessed Mother talks about abortion in the apparitions of Medjugorje, and I'm going to quote a couple of things here because they're pertinent to this talk today. The first comes from an interview with Mariana. Mariana is one of the 6 visionaries of Medjugorje. And in this particular interview, she talks about how Mariana brought up the topic of abortion with the Blessed Mother. She said in the interview, once I plucked up my courage, and during an apparition, I asked Our Lady why these children could not go to heaven, why they had to suffer and be killed if they were innocent. They hadn't chosen it. I said all sorts of things. Then Our Lady said to me maternally and seriously, no, these children are with me. There is no limbo. They are with me. Their parents will have to account for their sin of abortion. That was pretty profound. And then in 1990, the Blessed Mother was quoted as saying in Medjugorje, dear children, this evening I call you in a special way to pray for all unborn children. Pray especially for the mothers who consciously kill their children. Dear children, I am sad because many children are being killed. And then a year later, so it was 1991, the Blessed Mother allegedly said this in Medjugorje. Here is what I say to you. Satan is playing with you and with your souls, and I cannot help you because you are far from my heart. Now, this came shortly before this terrible civil war that happened in that country, there were terrible atrocities that happened. She was warning us, and she warns us today the same way, that we need God's help, and we need Mary to assist us in this tremendous battle that's going on with the devil. Another thing is a woman who was by the name of Valentina had taken a group of people. They were actually abortionists that she had taken to Medjugorje. This was 2011, and she took them as a kind of non-religious group to Medjugorje. And there, if you know Medjugorje, you understand that there's St. James Church is one central location. It's a part of the one of the main things to see there. Then Apparition Hill is another place, which is where the apparitions began. They began there at 6:40 p.m. And on June 24th, which was actually the anniversary was yesterday, but they celebrate the anniversary today because the final 6 were grouped together in 1981 on June 25th. Anyway, and then there's Cross Mountain. So this group of people were taken to Apparition Hill, and this woman who was an abortionist had a mystical experience, which is very, very profound. And I'll tell you about it. She had entered the area where Apparition Hill was, and they were making their way up toward a blue cross that is there that marks the place where the first apparition had taken place. And she said later, I had scarcely put my foot down on the hill when everything changed before my eyes. The rocks disappeared. The hill was suddenly covered with the bones and skulls of all the babies I had aborted over 40 years. And she nearly lost it. She threw up her hands. She said, look at these hands, to the people who were around her. Here are the hands which killed an entire city. She was devastated, but she had a great conversion. And in the meantime, over the following years, that same woman, Valentina, brought more and more abortion doctors there, 400 of them, so that they could experience the graces of conversion that God offers. So my friends had come back from Medjugorje, and they had told me about the miracle of the sun. The thing that, as an atheist, because I was still an atheist at the time, the thing that puzzled me the most was this thing about the miracle of the sun. I've done some writing about the miracle at Fatima, the miracle of the sun at Fatima, and it was the same miracle that they saw while they were in Medjugorje. And I was perplexed by this because it would be absolutely impossible for a person to stare into the sun and not burn their eyes. So another one of the miracles that they told me about was this thing called smelling roses. When the Blessed Mother wants to give you a special grace, she will oftentimes give you the smell of roses, but it will usually be in a place where, you don't smell roses. I don't have any roses here in my house. If I had a smell of roses right now, that would be, but it comes in a distinct manner because it's very perfumey and very, very strong, almost like someone has taken a bottle of rose perfume and put it up underneath your nose, and you are smelling this beautiful, very strong smell. So they told me about all of these things, and time went on, and 9 months later, something very dramatic happened in my life. But before I tell you that, I have to say that I didn't know while they were there that my friend Steve had written down on a piece of paper for the conversion of Craig Turner, folded it up and put it into a basket that was taken to the apparition room, and those petitions then are put at the feet of Mary, and then she answers those petitions. So I was ignorant of all of this, and 9 months later, the biggest thing happened to me practically that ever happened to me in my life. I began to hear a voice that was speaking inside of me, not from the outside and not through my ears. It came in through into me, and it was speaking very, very quietly, so quietly, in fact, that I couldn't quite make out what was being said. And I was puzzled by this because it went on day after day, but it was very quiet, and it was almost very short, almost like there was just a single phrase or something that was being spoken to me. And this went on for weeks until I decided I have to slow down a little bit and listen carefully to see what this voice is that's speaking to me. It would be almost like if you were at the other end of a gymnasium and someone spoke maybe in a kind of a quiet voice. If you are not perfectly still, you won't hear what's being spoken. But if you're active or you're doing something, you might hear someone speaking to you, but you can't actually make out what's being said. So I was living with a group of guys in a house in Arlington, Virginia, and no one was in the house except for me. I didn't want someone to walk into the room and see me doing something weird because I was going to try to listen to this voice and see what it was saying. And I stopped near the dining room table that we had, and I put my head down, I closed my eyes, and I just listened as hard as I could. And after about a minute, I heard pray. That's the word that I heard. And then there was about 10 seconds of silence. And then again, I heard pray. And it was spoken very quietly and slowly. And it was a person's voice that was telling me this very, very gently, but at the same time, I knew there was a certain kind of urgency to it. I needed to do this, or there might be some bad consequences of some kind. The person wasn't admonishing me in a severe way. The person was counseling me. And I heard this over and over again. And for the following weeks, it continued. And matter of fact, my solution to this problem of this voice speaking to me was I said, what I'll do is I'll just ignore it. Because you catch a cold, you ignore it, it goes away. You catch the flu, you ignore it, it goes away. I'll just ignore it. It'll go away. But the voice kept speaking to me. The only times that I didn't hear the voice, of course, when I'm asleep, I wasn't hearing the voice. But, you get wrapped up in your work and you're really focused. That kind of seemed to drown out the voice. And then when I would turn on the radio or do other things or become too busy, and I would drown out the voice. But when I was quiet and contemplative and still, I could hear this voice. Now, one of the most important messages that comes out of Medjugorje is pray, pray, pray. They quote the Virgin Mary as saying that. The voice that was speaking to me was the Virgin Mary. And I didn't know this. In fact, I didn't even know that the messages coming out of Medjugorje were pray, 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 and a bunch of other things that are actually very valuable for us to learn. But long story short is, I ignored the voice, but it kept going. And finally, one day, I'm in my house, I'm alone, and I'm thinking about it, and I don't know what to do to get rid of this voice. And I think to myself, I know what I'm going to do. If I pray, the voice will go away. Maybe I'll just start praying every day, and then the voice will go away, and then I can just sort of quit. That's the way to do it. That's what I'm going to do. So that evening, I got ready for bed. I brushed my teeth, went into my room, laid down on my bed, face down, propped up on my elbows with my chin on top of my hands. And I closed my eyes and I said, "Hi, it's me again." And then I just started to pray. And I actually don't even really think that I knew that well how to pray, except that it's a conversation with God. And I would just started out with my commute. I said, I got this long commute. It's 30 minutes. I have to go through traffic, and my job is in Maryland, but I live in Virginia. And then I went on to talking about some work people that I work with. And I went for 3 minutes. And then I just thought, I said, I think I'm tired. I'm going to sleep. And I rolled over and I went to sleep. And the next day, I got ready for bed and I did the same thing. And I just talked about my day. I didn't actually know what to say. And nobody had ever really done a good job, I guess, of explaining to me how you pray. That's what I did. I just talked to God, who might be out there, and told him about my day. And I talked for about 4 minutes. And the next day it was about 5 minutes. And this grew each evening into a routine. For about a month I did this. And then one day I realized, oh, that voice has stopped. It stopped about a day and a half ago. I thought, oh, I guess I can quit praying now. And I thought about it and I thought, I actually kind of like this. And it actually feels good. And maybe I'll just keep going. I'm just going to keep going and see what happens. So that's what I did. I just kept praying every evening. And I continued this process throughout the summer of 1991. I got to the point where I needed a big boost in my spiritual life, because I was doing, I was trying to live. I wasn't a Catholic yet. And I didn't even necessarily decide that I was going to be Christian. I just knew that I was praying to God with a capital G, and that was about it. But in the process of all of this, I was not being chaste, and I was told interiorly, not with words, but with an impression that was very strong and very clear, that that's what God wants of us. We are supposed to be chaste, even if we find it difficult. We are supposed to be chaste, and there is no wiggle room. There aren't exceptions. It's just simply that's what you're supposed to do. So I approached my girlfriend, who is now my wonderful wife, different person from the other girlfriend, the girl that I dated that I was referring to earlier. And I told her about this. And she threw up her arms and was upset with me and said, "What are you talking about?" And so we couldn't come to a conclusion until we chose the date of Labor Day. This was actually now Labor Day 1992, okay? And Labor Day 1992 was quite I said earlier that it was the summer of 91. I should have said it was summer of 92 when all of this was going on. I kind of made a little mistake there. But it was summer of 92, and we decided that this life of chastity, which was so important, we would have to live at all costs. We're going to do it, and we're going to start on Labor Day 1992. That was the day, actually, that we got struck by lightning. And here's what happened. We had decided to go camping, and Chai had been out to Canada a couple of times to a park north of Toronto called Algonquin Park, and had been there for 2 different summers carrying canoes through the woods. It's beautiful, but it is really remote. And I had decided, well, okay, why don't I take my girlfriend off camping? We'll go camping in Canada. It'll be a fabulous experience. She says to me, I don't know if I want to go camping. I said, oh, camping is fun. You'll love it. She says, well, I don't know. Something else? I said, nah, you're going to love it. So we go up to Canada. The morning of the 3rd day, we hear this rumble in the distance, and there's a storm approaching. So this storm comes, and we are way out in the middle of the woods, kind of close, very close actually, to a lake. But this lightning is coming out of this storm and blasting trees around us. It was amazing. There was not just a huge light show and not just rumbles and thunder. It was a huge storm. And I'm from Texas, and I've seen big storms, but this thing was a monster. All of a sudden, I'm lying on my left side, and this tremendous pain hits me, and I was shrieking and screaming for 2.5 seconds. And then it just diminished and went away, and I was paralyzed, and I was knocked unconscious completely. And when I came to, we had purchased a very large tent to sleep in. My girlfriend was there moaning and groaning because she had been struck as well, although not quite as bad as me. The lightning had hit a tree near the tent, traveled through the roots, and then entered my body through my left shoulder, traveled through my body, and then leapt from my left knee into her body where her hips are, and then through her right leg and down into the ground, and then continued its journey. And it had paralyzed her from the waist down. I was knocked unconscious completely, and then also knocked out. I was knocked unconscious, and I was also paralyzed completely. Anyway, when we came to, we realized that we had been struck by lightning, and what we had to do was we were going to have to go back, call the camping trip over. And we went back to Washington, D.C., and she says to me, I need to go see a priest. I haven't been to confession in a long time. I just need to see a priest. So, Karen, how much more time do I have? Just a couple of minutes? Is that okay? Okay, I'll wrap it up in a couple of minutes. So she and I go in, and I've never met a priest before. She goes in, gives her confession, and then ends up inviting me into his office. And he talks to us for a few minutes and then says, before you go, I'd like to give you each something. And he pulls out these 2 medallions. Now, I don't know if you can see this, but this right here is a miraculous medal. And he says, yeah, like this. Can you see that?
Yeah.
So he gave us one, he blessed them and gave one to each of us. And then what happened was I used to wear a shark tooth because I was a very beachy New Jersey kind of person, sort of like Karen is. And I had a shark tooth, but 2 weeks before that moment, my shark tooth suddenly disappeared, and I never found it. It was something I wore all the time. And to this day, I have no idea where it went. But actually what happened was the Blessed Mother was bringing the miraculous medal into my life, and she didn't want to have some kind of competition with a shark tooth. So she got rid of the shark tooth, and I said to the priest, I used to have this shark tooth, but I lost it, so I'll wear this instead. So he got a laugh out of that. My girlfriend, who is my lovely wife, Kathleen, looks at me as if to say, you never know the right thing to say, do you? And off we go. And I begin to hear the prayers of my friends who are praying for me. I have other beautiful experiences the Blessed Mother choreographed in my life. The story goes on. It's a little bit too long for a short period like this, but it was a beautiful set of experiences that brought me to understand something that is a core truth that everybody really needs to learn and to understand and to know. And that is my previous 19, 20, my life when I was in my 20s, really believed that there is no action that will ever last. There's nothing that we can do that is truly important, because eventually all of us will die. Our bodies will disassemble because we're only particles of matter from the universe. And eventually, maybe 1,000 years from now, and maybe 100 years from now, people won't remember what we did. Our lives will become wiped clean. And when my conversion came along, I realized, actually, this was implanted in me. It was a special grace that I received, that every single action of ours has meaning, down to the smallest thing that we do. Even the movement of eyes. St. Faustina talks about how just the movement of a hand is important. And that's true. Everything, not just some of the big life issues are mega important, but even the smallest things, how we do the dishes when we do the dishes at night, okay? All the things that we do are very, very important. God sees them all, and God blesses them all when we live in communion with God and with the Blessed Mother. So that's my story. Amen. Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. Really? I didn't know that. That's great. I got to mark my calendar for future years also. Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Karen. Thank